Hi guys, and welcome back to Pass and Move. And for today's episode in the Tactics and Team Guide series, we've got in the La Liga, Alaves. Obviously we've covered Atletico Bilbao and Atletico Madrid already. We're going to go about it alphabetically, so of course if any of the teams or the teams below Alaves, we'll be coming around to it soon enough. Of course, as the title suggests, we'll just be showing you possibly the best way to set up Alaves for success, and just a player guide as well, maybe some areas that you want to invest in, some players that you might want to get rid of and the likes. So Alaves, of course, it's always interesting to take any team on in FM really. But Alaves in particular, if you have a look at their season preview, they're 16th in the table, or expected to finish 16th in the table. The board themselves, all they care about is that you avoid relegation, which the media predict that you should be able to do. But of course, it is a tough competition. I think, if I'm not mistaken, the La Liga is the top competition in the world, based on reputation at least, in FM as well. And so, you have a very tough job to do. But at the same time, it's always a really interesting challenge to take on, to try and turn Alaves into a top team and overtake the likes of Barcelona and both Madrid teams, and of course Sevilla as well now, and Valencia, Atletico Bilbao, all these really good teams. But yeah, I mean, how do you set them up for success? What's the best way to do it? So they just got promoted back in 2015-16, and of course they're out of the La Liga for quite some time, since 2005-2006. So they ended last season in 9th, but despite that success, the board just care about you avoiding relegation, which is fair enough, a probably more accurate way of trying to keep expectations at a reasonable level, because it doesn't mean if you ended in 9th one season, that means you're suddenly going to be the best team in the world. It's unlikely that in this one season they've suddenly gotten a host of amazing players. But anyways, that's a different issue entirely. If you ask me what is one of the first things I do when I join a squad, obviously I sort out my staff entirely, but one of the main things I like to do is actually see which staff member I can trust in terms of their judgment of ability. So our best one at the moment here is Dinko, our head of youth development, which is normally a good person to turn towards when it comes to judgment of ability. Of course, I'd rather my assistant manager to be best at that, but he's only got judgment of ability 2 and potential 2, so that's really poor. But head of youth development is a good person to turn to as well, so we'll be trusting the judgment of Dinko here. And another thing I like to do is actually go on team report, have a look at the strengths, have a look at the weaknesses. So we do have some depth issues by the look of it. We don't have much of a transfer budget apparently. Just overall depth really, but I don't know why it's gone individually, saying defensive depth, midfield depth, goalkeeping depth. Looks like we don't have too much in the wage budget room either, so we're going to have to rely on loans by the looks of things, or even free transfers. Also lacking in decision making, leadership, strength, and the coaching staff apparently needs some room for improvement too. You can have an overall look at the numbers here as well, in terms of which areas have the most versatility and players available to you. But yeah, and you can also try and work towards your strengths, which apparently is an aggressive and committed squad. So, but mainly I just go into squad depth. I have everyone showing their current ability in all positions as well. I don't set it to any particular formation. I also like to set it to the player's best role, so I don't interfere with their star ratings. Just see where's the best place to place them in, and what was the best role to play them in as well. Then of course I set the opinion off to the most trusted staff member, who's Dinko, and that's it. And as you can see, it shows you every possible position you can set out your players in, and you can kind of tell really you want your first teamers to be 3 stars minimum. Of course, it also depends on your division. So let's say, for example, 3 stars here, Pacheco, he would normally represent a good option as a first team player, but at the same time he is just a leading player for most second division sides according to Dinko. So you don't want to rely on this type of player, because although star ability changes according to the quality of players available to you, you have to keep that in mind, so that 3 stars normally is good, but you're supposed to be looking for first division players at this point, so he's technically not good enough for the division, but good enough for your squad apparently. But anyways, you can tell we've got a couple of good striking options in Munir and Bojan. You do want to try and focus on bringing out the best out of your star players, and so your star players are obviously the ones who are 3 stars and above. So you can assume 3.5 stars would be a good place to start to try and bring out the best out of everyone. So you got the likes of Ibai Gomez, who can perform in the left wing and the left midfield as well. Katai can perform in the right wing, but can't really perform in the right midfield. He drops off in terms of his ability, drops a whole star's worth. You got Bojan, like we mentioned, Oscar Romero in attacking midfield, Munir as a striker, and Bojan can play as a striker as well, but he does drop off a little bit. Daniel Torres and Alvaro Medran can both be central midfielders, but Daniel Torres is better in defensive midfield. But at the same time, of course, you're lacking a little bit in defensive midfield in terms of numbers, with just 3 players available to you. Wing backs, you've got options, but it looks like your left wing back is stronger than your right wing back, so maybe it's best to play with left fullbacks and right fullbacks instead. Not the best defense in the world, and looks like your attacking talent is better than your defensive talent overall. And that kind of leaves you with 2 options really. You obviously have to play with a 4-man backline, that's without a doubt. You don't have that amazing centre backs to be playing a 3-man backline. So we'll be going with the 2 fullbacks and 2 central defenders. And the decision making starts to come in this area of the field. Now, do you play a 3-man midfield, with the defensive midfielder, to bring out the best out of Torres and have Medran in his preferred position and maybe even Thomas Pina? Or do you play a 4-4-2, so you have Ibai Gomez who can perform in the left and just, unfortunately put Katai in a bit of an uncomfortable position, but that way you can bring out the best out of Munir and Bojan playing next to each other, for example. There's also the option of playing without wingers entirely and just go with 2 attacking midfielders so that Bojan and Oscar Romero can feature alongside each other and Munir can be the striker player who we're aiming for. But I've gone for a 4-2-3-1 formation, a bit of a boring one, but it's the one that seems to bring out the best out of them. I might sacrifice either one of Bojan or Oscar Romero. It's a bit of an issue, but at the same time, one of the key decisions for me to making key reasons for me making this decision is that Oscar Romero's contract ends in January, so it's not someone who you can entirely rely on and building your team around and whatnot. He might be a little bit upset because he's expecting first team football, but you don't have any real obligations to play him. He is a loanee, and you don't have any options to buy him or any of that sort. You've only got him for 6 months, and so it doesn't make too much sense to alter complete formation just for him. Bojan is a loanee as well, but at least he's remaining for the whole season. But yeah, so that I think I've gone with a 4-2-3-1 with a symmetric one, which is a defensive midfielder and central midfielder. I'm pretty sure you guys have seen me use this formation before. It just seems to be the one that makes the most sense. A lot of top teams around the world use this formation, and it's why I tend to go towards it when it comes to tactics, because a lot of teams are already set up that way. And then later on in the future you can eventually start to build away from that. So now that we know our formation, we can actually go and have a look at our squad and see what areas need investment in, what players need to be first teamers, who should be backups and such as that. So a good thing to do is actually just get rid of everyone that's been loaned out. As you can already see, a bunch of these players, or a bunch of Alaves' players, are loaned in, so that's something to keep in mind. You obviously don't have the finances to actually buy players, so it's a good thing that they did loan in players, but you just do have to keep in mind that these players aren't yours for life, and so you do have to be very careful about how you build your squad. But yeah, a huge importance of building a squad is your numbers. You want to get the correct number of players in your squad. You've got 23. For me, the perfect number is 22 players. A starting 11 of leading star or world-class players of the division, and a backup 11 of youngsters with potential who can become leading star or world-class players. That way, the balance for me is set correctly. The youngsters are itching for game time, but they're not going to complain if they don't get it because they know they're not good enough just yet. And the starting 11 are wary of the players behind them who are gunning for their position. So it's healthy competition. So it's a good thing that you've got the 23 players. That means you've got numbers. The question is, do you have the right quality and do you have the right numbers in the same place? So you might have 23 players, but if you've got 20 strikers, then that's a mess, isn't it? So you just have to keep that in mind as well. Another thing I like to quickly do is actually just go to my under-19s or the reserves or the B team and stuff, and just have a look at if there's anyone ready for first team football. So by the looks of it, you've hardly got an under-19s team, which definitely needs some work, and no one's ready for it either. So let's have a look at Alaves B. There's Enzo Zidane, but again, he's not ready yet either, apparently. So yeah, I think he'll be okay. Looks like your B team's much better set up than your under-19s, but no real star quality than Danny Iglesias and maybe Adrian. But obviously you have to wait until they're actually ready for the division. So let's go back to your actual first squad. So we'll have a look at goalkeepers. You've got two of them, Pacheco, who's a leading player for most second division sides, and you've got a nice little youngster here who's a second division player as well, Antonio Silveira, and who can improve a lot in the future. So you've got a nice little balance technically, because you've got a starting 11 player and a backup youngster with potential. But the problem is that neither of them are actually ready for first team football. None of them are good enough for, La Liga quality, first division quality. So it is a bit of an issue, and you do have a bit of a decision to make, which is, do you invest in a decent goalkeeper, or even a good one if you can find one? It's unlikely that you can actually, lure in a leading goalkeeper in the division. But if you can find a good one, or even a decent goalkeeper for division, you can do that and keep Silveira for your backup, for example. But definitely Pacheco and Silveira are not good enough for your division just yet. If you'd ask me if you were in the perfect ideal situation, the thing to do would actually be to send out Silveira on loan to come back to you ready for next division. But currently you just, you have to make do with what you've got. So Pacheco should be your first choice. Silveira should be your backup youngster potential, who you can play in cup competitions to try and increase his potential, his ability rather. And, he's going to be a top talent for you, basically 5-star rating. And, if you give him the game time, he will perform for you, I reckon. But anyways, that leaves you with just one right back. So it looks like you don't need, the goalkeeper department, even though you lack quality, you've got the numbers, so it's not a huge area of investment that's needed. It looks like the right back area, though, is Carlos Vigare is your only right back. And he, of course, is just a good player for most second division sides. He has potential to be a decent first division player. And so maybe he could be a backup youngster potential, but you definitely need to invest in the right back who is good enough for the division. Whether you sign him for free, whether you sign him at the end of the contract, whether you sign him on loan, you definitely need a right back. It doesn't matter. You need the numbers. Centre-backs, you've got 4 of them, but quality-wise, you've only got Alexis, who is your first choice, as well as Rodrigo. But of course, Alexis has a problem, which is that he is prone to injuries. Rodrigo, though, is the ideal player that you're looking for, a decent player for most first division sides. He should be a starter for your team, and he's also got the added bonus of being a youngster who can still improve even further and become a good player for most first division sides. Your backups aren't the greatest in the world. Victor is a good player for most second division sides and doesn't have any potential, and worse than that, he's also susceptible to injuries, so you do want to improve on him. Guillermo is a youngster with potential, but he's not even ready for the first division, so he's not the type of youngster that you're looking for. But the good news is that he does have potential to actually become a decent first division central defender. So as you can see so far, your defense and your goalkeeping needs a huge ton of work. For some reason, the media think you're going to end in 16th, but the truth is you really are relegation candidates, and you would do a good job to keep this team out of getting relegated out of the second division. Hector, second division, you can tell that they've literally just come out of the second division because a huge chunk of the players are still not good enough for the first division. They haven't had enough time to move away from these players. So Hector is a leading player for most second division sides. He's susceptible to injuries. He's not your top left back though. Ruben is, and of course Ruben is your actual player. He's a youngster with potential as well. He can become probably a good player for most first division sides based on his star rating. And yeah, he should be the player that you play more. He's expecting first team football. He is your actual player in comparison to Hector, who's just a loanee, and so you should try and invest more in Ruben's development more so than Hector's here. Defensive midfielders and central midfielders, you've got 4, which is the perfect number that you're looking for, but the problem is a lot of them are more defensive midfielders than central midfielders. Alvaro Medran is your only central midfielder. I'm sure he's actually one of our first choices, a decent player for most first division. He's got potential to be good as well, but of course he's just a loanee, so don't hold on to him too tightly. Daniel is probably your star player, defensive midfielder, good player for most first division sides. You want to try and bring out the best out of this player as much as possible because he is your key man, and better than anything, he is a Colombian international as well. I think he's your highest paid player too. Thomas Pina is a backup, leading player for most second division sides. So again, you want to improve on that, bringing in a youngster potential possibly. You've got Manu Garcia, who's also just second division talent, and it's going to be a bit tough. But yeah, you can possibly play one of these defensive midfielders as central midfielders instead. They are capable of it, but they are playing different roles, which we'll discuss later on. But you've got the numbers at least, so that's good to see. And so far, it's really just the right back spot that needs investment in. You've got a winger in Mubarak, and you've got a host of wingers, really. You've got Alexander, Ibai, Gomez. We'll really just highlight everyone here. So you've got your front four to deal with now, which means you should have 8 players. But we're looking at 10 at the moment, so at least 2 of these players shouldn't be in your squad. I think that's the case, really, because everyone else here, this is your goalkeeping, your defense, your central midfield, and there you go. Alright, so this is your front four, and your front four, you've got a ton of options, really. You've got Oscar Romero, Boyan, Katai, Gomez, and Munir are the 4 that you want to try and squeeze into the same 11. Unfortunately, though, it does mean that either one of Boyan or Oscar Romero is going to be sacrificed. Now, it's up to you who you choose, really. But both players are very comfortable playing in the roles that we've assigned. At the same time, you could really consider Boyan as a backup striker if you wanted to instead, but that's a different thing entirely we'll talk about. So if we assume Oscar Romero, Katai, and Gomez are definite players who are remaining, Munir as well, and Boyan, of course. We've got Mubarak here, who's a leading player for most second division sides. Bergi, leading player for most second division sides. Alfonso. As you can see, the talent, none of them are first division players. But if we have a look at the likes of Munir, he's a first division footballer. Ibai, first division footballer, susceptible to injuries though, so it's a bit of a worry. Katai is also a first division player, so it's good to see, despite his star rating of 3. And Oscar, first division player, good player for most second division sides, first division sides, sorry. And again, he is one of your key players because him alongside Daniel Torres are your only ones who are good players, as well as Boyan. So as much as we'd love to squeeze Boyan into this side, it's going to be a bit tough because once we move him into a striker position, his rating drops a little bit. It's more importantly than actual rating, judgment of ability or whatever, is the role ability, not just their ability. So great, Mubarak is 3.5 stars, for example, but the moment you move him into central midfield, for example, his ability will actually only drop to 2 stars, like that. So you do have to keep these things in mind. But anyways, that leaves you with these 5 players, and you currently just need 3 because Boyan 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. That leaves you just room for 3 players. You definitely need a backup striker. So whether you consider Boyan as a backup attacking midfielder or even as your first choice attacking midfielder, it's all down to your preferences really between these two. There's not much separating them. I've only picked Romero, and I'll show you in just a moment actually, but you can really pick either one of them. To be honest, I would be inclined to pick Boyan because he's the one who's actually remaining longer, and of course he's more committed to your squad in that sense. But yeah, if you consider that, then you kind of have to consider Ruben as your backup striker. That leaves you with just the wingers. And you've got 4 when you only really need 2. Alfonso is the type of player that you would typically want to offload, so I would suggest you terminate his loan. He's not a good enough player to get on loan. You don't really want to use him. As good as his attributes are, it just doesn't make sense to have him on loan when you don't need him. The good news is that you're not paying anything for him, so you could always hold on to him just for the sake of it, but he's not good enough in ability. He's the weakest out of the 4 selected currently. You'd assume Mubarak is definitely someone you want to hold on to, so that leaves you just 1 winger, and since Mubarak is a left winger, you're looking for a right winger at the moment, so that leaves you with Bergai, who can't even play a right wing, Alfonso can't play right wing, and Christian is a bit of a striker, and so you can actually consider just retraining him into an inside forward, which would actually quite suit him in truth. And you'd be better off doing that instead, and there you go. I think that would be the one that makes the most sense. You can sell off Bergi, invest that into right back, whatever money you get. Alfonso, really up to you, but you're keeping a player for no real reason because you don't need the numbers for him. He's excess basically, and you're better off just getting him off so he doesn't complain of his game time and suddenly your squad dynamics is ruined because of the player that you didn't even really need. But yeah, a lot of investment is definitely needed. Your attacking talent, like we mentioned at the beginning, is much better than your defensive talent. You are a smaller team, one of the smaller teams in the division, so you should be building from the back rather from the front. So it's a bit weird that they've gone this way. But maybe you can try and outscore your opponents and hope that's good enough to avoid relegation. But getting on to tactics, you'll see that we are playing typically an attacking formation, but we're also using an attacking tactic as well. And the reason is, as you can see, the roles that we have set which the players are comfortable in, are very attacking roles. We don't have defensive midfielders, we don't have anchormans, we don't have ball-winning midfielders, these type of players. We don't have wide midfielders, for example. We don't have, you know, these hard-working roles, or these roles that aren't very creative, for example, or very attacking, in which we can build a more defensive-minded formation. So unfortunately, the best way to bring the best out of Alaves is actually go with an attacking formation and an attacking tactic as well. So, you know, playing attacking with a small team doesn't always mean that you're suddenly going to be losing. If you can bring out the best out of them, they can perform well. Just think of a team such as Bournemouth in the Premier League, who refuse to play defensively. They play in their own way of football, which is possession football and that type of thing. And they still do really well. So it doesn't mean because you're playing attacking and that you're with a small team you lose. It's just about trying to bring out the best out of your squad, and this squad is made for attacking football. You've got a bunch of playmakers, an inside forward, a trequartista, wingers, fullbacks, central defenders, all that sort of stuff, and so it makes sense. So what we're going for is to try and counter-attack how attacking we are. I've tried to go with a less risky attacking mentality, but less risky style of play. So we're going with cautious attacking football, and so that means we'll be closing down less so that we keep a better shape. We're using offside trap. That's my only two instructions. I try and avoid using team instructions as much as possible, unless it's to cover up weaknesses. Playing on control should help us not get counter-attacked on, but you can definitely play with attacking mentality as well if need be. Fluidity or team shape is really up to you. You can play with fluid, structured, whatever you want to work with. It's always down to preferences. Fluid means your team players will work better together. Structure just means everyone will be focused on their own individual roles, but therefore keep a better team shape. Be more solid defensively. So that's all up to you as well, which one you prefer. But I always say, if you're unsure of it, just keep it flexible. And so this is why I have it on flexible at the moment. Not because I'm unsure, but just, you know, because you could really use it whatever way you want to use it. I'll just keep it as flexible. So that's kind of it. I'm not a fan of huge tactical instructions. I like my roles and the balance of the squad to do the job itself instead. And so we can cover that in just a second. We've got a winger in Gomez, who we've also set the instructions cross from deep. We're looking for crosses from deep. We're looking for roaming players. We're looking for creative players. And that's the type of, you know, dribbling players is the type of style that we're trying to create. So playing an offside trap means we'll normally be a higher line, especially if we're playing with control. The defensive line naturally pushes up, and so we've got a sweeper keeper to try and counter that, and Pacheco is very comfortable in that sweeper keeper support role. Central defenders, Alexis and Eli, are comfortable in that role. You should probably move Eli on the right since that's his preference. But yeah, both central defenders, I don't think either one of them are really ball-playing defenders. Looks like Alexis is comfortable playing a defensive centre-back as well, but I prefer central defenders. And he's got the mentals for it as well, mental attributes. Duarte and Vigore are your fullbacks on attack. Now, this type of football requires overlapping runs, so we've got that in the striker partnership, in the flank partnerships as well. The fullbacks on attack will overlap the wing on support and the inside forward, Katai. We've got deep line playmaker on defender in defensive midfield, Torres. It's his most comfortable role and most comfortable position. We did want to try and bring the best out of him. We've got Medran as well, who's most comfortable as an advanced playmaker or a deep line playmaker, but we didn't want two deep line playmakers. At the same time, an advanced playmaker is a bit too weak in central midfield in terms of winning the ball back and all that sort of business. We do need someone in the squad doing that work. And so we've got Medran on the roaming playmaker instead. He's very comfortable with it. His only weakness really is his strength. But all his other attributes are very good in that role. He's comfortable with it. Not absolutely happy with it, but he's decent enough in that role. We've also got Romero in attacking midfield on attack. You could probably set Boyan here instead, but as you can see, very close in terms of the role ability. Boyan just a hint more comfortable with it. If you look at the attributes, decision making, concentration is a bit of his weakness, but he moves into channels. You can have a look at Oscar Romero and see his attributes as well, what you prefer. So Oscar Romero more comfortable as an attacking midfielder, but he doesn't really have good positioning. His concentration is his weakness, but all his other attributes are really good as well. So again, you can play them based on form if you want instead. But if you ask me, having a look at the attributes now, Romero looks a little bit better. And maybe you can keep him as your first choice until he leaves on the end of his contract. You can try and extend his contract as well, of course, later on. Then we've got trequartista Munir. It's his most comfortable role. You can play him in a number of different roles for sure, but we want to try to bring out the best out of him, and it looks like trequartista is the way to go. roams from positions, moves into channels, all that sort of business, so that works for us as well. You can definitely try and set your fullbacks to cross from deep instead, but considering that they overlap, it's a bit tough to cross from deep. So I just set the winger on support to cross from deep instead, but you can try setting the fullbacks as well. I would assume don't do it, but give it a go and see how it goes. Got the roaming playmaker. We need to set the tactical instructions of tackle harder and mark tighter. We need someone to do the dirty work after all, and so Medran's going to be that one. If you find that he's doing it a bit too much, you can maybe just get rid of those two instructions, because we do have to keep in mind that we are closing down much less, or trying to anyways. Closing down less, sorry. You can definitely go with the close down much less, but I'm just not a fan of completely not closing down. And that's kind of it. It's just trying to bring out the best out of the players while remaining well, looking good in a tactical team shape, working well together, keeping a good balance, and also trying to get the best out of the players at the same time. And as you can see from the analysis, not too many huge gaps for the opposition to exploit. And so we should be able to do well with this formation, and you can make some other tactical tweaks to it. In your other two slots, you could possibly play with two DMs instead, or two central midfielders. You can also bring down your wingers that are high up the pitch when you face the likes of Barcelona, for example. You might need a bit more of a solid formation. In attacking midfield, you could possibly give some more instructions that you might like to work with. Normally I'd recommend moving to channels, but the trequartista already does that, so you don't want to get into each other's space. You could possibly tell him to dribble more and play more risky passes, try and be a bit more of a playmaker, even though he's an attacking midfielder. He should be overlapping Munir quite often, so that we should see a good partnership there as well. But that's kind of it. I think that's the best way to bring the best out of your squad, and you should, as you can see, a lot of their star ratings have remained the same. No one below 2.5 stars, and that's kind of how you want to keep it. And like I mentioned earlier, it's your midfield attacking talent that is the best compared to your central defenders, compared to your defense and your goalkeeper, really. That's kind of it in terms of the team and tactics guide. We can cover some quick things here, like training. I normally like to have a high intensity during pre-season and then average during the season itself. Match preparation is always just match tactics unless my scout tells me otherwise. You could possibly set up some better friendlies if you ask me. I like to have 6 friendlies in general, but even the actual quality of teams that you're playing, you could probably do a bit better too. Competitions, avoid relegation like mentioned and reach 5th round. You should be able to do that. You just have to win 1 match in the Spanish Cup. Bear in mind, I think if you do win the Spanish Cup, you do get into Europa League football, if I'm not mistaken. So don't take this competition lightly at all, because you could, even if you do get relegated and you have Europa League football, then that's going to be really good for you financially as well. You want to take that next step as much as possible. Staff we already talked about. Dynamics, you can have a quick look, I suppose. Match cohesion's already abysmal, so that's good to see. Scouting's been completely revamped. You do want to set it at World for both youth and senior packages as much as possible, but it's according to the board as well. Budget, I normally like to have it middle, leaning towards transfer budget, but at the moment it looks like that won't leave you with much either way. Plus, you do want to try and avoid spending as much money as possible because of your team. So there's no restrictions in terms of scouting. That's at least good to see from the board. But yeah, you could definitely improve your staff overall. Let's have a quick look at finances as well. You've got 8 million in the bank, so really if you did spend a lot more than what they've given you, you'd still be okay. But they're trying to protect themselves, I suppose. The really good news is actually that you have no debt. It's very unlikely in modern football to have a club with no debt, so it's good to see. And your financial status is secure. So if you're smart, as you can see, a bunch of greens here, you can really start to build a top team with Alaves if you can be a bit patient and do the smart thing and not spend too much money. Your transfer budget really does go up and up and up in the next 3 seasons. Youngsters to look out for, we already discussed. I think that's all for today's episode. If you did enjoy it, of course, please do hit the like button and subscribe for more Daily Football Manager 2018 content. And of course, leave your thoughts in the comment section below. And as always, guys, thank you all very much for watching.